So I'm just about to finish this new hat. It's knitted from the top down, so from the crown down, and it ends with a lace pattern with beads and then an I-cord cast off. So I just want to show you how I do the I-cord cast off because it's a really nice look. Now most I-cords probably have 3 stitches because I'm knitting with 4-ply yarn and I'm doing the I-cord cast off on 2.75mm needles. It made the 3 stitches made the I-cord a little bit too thin, so I've actually done 4 stitches. So I'm going to show you how I did it, and I'm using a smaller needle for the I-cord cast off just because the I-cord cast off tends to flare a little bit, so I decided I would use some smaller needles. Right, I should have untangled my needles before I started. So imagine to start off the I-cord, so I've done it all the way around. I've only got a few stitches left to cast off. So these 4 stitches are my I-cord stitches, and then these 4 are the stitches I need to cast off. So imagine I was starting at beginning. So imagine I haven't cast off all these stitches. To start off the I-cord cast off, you need to do the cable cast on. And the cable cast on, you put your needle in between the first and the second stitch, like that. So you don't go into the first stitch, you go between the first and the second stitch. Then you wrap your yarn around your needle as if you're knitting. So whether you're knitting continental or English, just wrap your yarn around your needle as normal as if you're knitting. And then you pull that loop through between the first and second stitch like that. And then you put that stitch on your left hand needle. Now most people will turn it or twist it. So instead of putting it just on where your needles are pointing towards each other like that, they will turn it so that the needles are pointing in the same direction and then put it on like that. I don't know whether it makes a huge amount of difference because I don't tend to do this cast on, except for when I need to cast on a few stitches like this. So now I've cast on 1 stitch. Now I don't tend to tighten it straight away. I tend to leave it a little bit loose, put my needle in between the new first and second stitch, and then I tighten it. And then wrap the yarn around and pull it through. Put that stitch on the left hand needle, twisting it, leave it loose, put your needle in between the first and the second stitch, then tighten it, and then cast on another one. So you're going to do 4 in total. So when you've done 4, the last stitch always kind of goes a little bit funny, so just be a bit careful with that. But when you've done 4, so I've actually only done 3, so where you put your needle in for the first time, you get a little bit of a gap. Can you see that here? I've got a bit of a gap where my thumb is. So the first stitch after that gap is one of my original stitches, and then are the stitches I've cast on. So I've done 3 stitches. So I'm looking at that, I would think, oh, I've done 4 because there's a gap and then there's 4. But that first stitch after the gap is one of my original stitches. That's not one I've cast on. So I've only cast on 3. So you need 4. I'm going to undo this because I've already done most of my cable cast on. So when you cast on 4, let me show you how you carry on. So you knit 3 stitches. So because we're doing a 4 stitch cable and 4 stitch I-cord, we're knitting 3 stitches. If you're doing a 3 stitch I-cord, you would knit 2 stitches. So you knit the first, so look at how many I-cord stitches you have. So if you got 3, you would knit 2. If you got 4, you would knit 3. So you knit, you got 1 I-cord stitch left. And then you're going to do a decrease with that last I-cord stitch and 1 stitch from your original stitches that you're casting off. Now you can do different decreases. You can do SSK, you can do knit 2 together through the back loop, you can do knit 2 together. I actually tend to do SSK or knit 2 together through the back loop. On this one I tried SSK and knit 2 together through the back loop, and they didn't look very much, there wasn't much of a difference, so I've gone with knit 2 together through the back loop just because it's quicker. So I'm going to go into the next 2 stitches through the back loop and knit them together. So now I've got 4 stitches on my right hand needle and I've cast off 1 stitch from my left hand needle. So I'm going to slip those stitches back to the left hand needle. Okay, and then I'm going to knit. So now the working yarn is coming from stitch number 4. If you've got 3 stitches in your I-cord, your working yarn will be coming from stitch number 3. So I'm now going to knit those stitches again, but the yarn is coming from stitch number 4. So it feels a little bit weird when you first do it. Now make sure you don't leave that first stitch too loose. You want to pull it so that it pulls tight across the back and sort of pulls into like a tube. 2, and you're going to knit 3 again. So you knit until you have 1 I-cord stitch left, and then you knit 2 together through the back loop. Slip those 4 stitches back to the left hand needle, knit 3, knit 2 together through the back loop. Now the I-cord cast off tends to flare a little bit, so that's why I'm knitting a hat on 3mm needles, and I'm using 2.75 for the cast off. Now it would probably be easier just to get a double pointed needle in this size, but I just grabbed a circular needle because I happen to have one handy. So I dropped the stitch there. So I'm going to knit 3, knit 2 together. So I'm just going to show you how we're going to finish this off. I'm going to knit 3, knit 2 together through the back loop. So that's the last of my stitches from my hat stitches. So I now come to the end. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to join across the end here. So I'm going to finish this off, I've now got 4 stitches. I'm actually going to knit across those 4 stitches. So I'm going to knit 2, then I'm going to knit 1 together through the back loop, so I end up with 3 stitches. Then I'm going to slip, oops, I dropped 1. Let me just pick up that dropped stitch because it went down a couple of rows. So I'm just going to pick that up quickly. Then I'm going to knit 1, knit 2, I'm going to cast that one off, knit the next one, cast it off, and then I'm going to take that, actually I'm not going to do that, so I've now cast it off, so that after you finish doing your last I-cord row, you then do I did one more row where I knitted 2, knit 2 together, and then I slipped them all back, and then I just cast them off. So I'm going to break the yarn, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to join this. Now I'm not necessarily saying that this is the only way of doing it or the best way of doing it, but this is just the way I've decided to do it. I don't use I-cord cast off a lot, so I haven't done like a load of research into the best way of doing this. So I'm just going to show you how I'm doing it on this hat. Okay, so you now obviously see we've got a gap there, so we want to join these, the beginning and the end of this I-cord cast off. So I've just left a slightly longer tail, put my sewing needle on, I'm going to just go across the gap into the top of the start of the I-cord cast off, and then I'm going to go back to the end, just go through the top, I just want to kind of join it, then I'm going to go back to the beginning again. So I just want to kind of join that, and then you can see I've got a bit of a hole there, so I want to close that up. So I'm going to go, hang on, I can just hold this the other way. So I'm going to try and do a kind of mattress stitch. So I'm going to go down one side and then down the other side, just go under a couple of stitches and then down this side and then down this side. I'm kind of just making this up as I go along, and then just pull it tight. So that's what it looks like. So you just want to join it. I would just look at what you're doing, then I'm just going to take that through to the back. Just look at what you're doing, and if you think it looks okay, then that's fine, and to me that looks okay. I'm happy with that. Then I've taken the yarn through to the back, and then I'm just going to weave it in. So I tend to find a row of purl stitches, and then I go into, I'm going to go one row down actually, there we go, and then I'm just going to go into, with the purl stitches you've got bumps going kind of that way, and then you've got bumps going between the stitches that way. So I'm going into all the top bumps first. So if you pick one row, go into all the top bumps on that row for a few stitches. So how far I go depends on how slippery my yarn is. If I've got a yarn that's very slippery, I tend to do more. So I've done 2, 4, 6, 8, and then I'm going to go back in the bottom bumps on that same row. Stitches are really tiny. I don't tend to go backward as far, so if I do 8 stitches one way, I tend to do like 4 the other way, so usually about half. If my yarn is very slippery, I might go a little bit further. And then before I trim the yarn, I just pull it to make sure that my weaving in the ends isn't too tight. Because I got a row of yarn overs here with the bees, you just gotta make sure you don't go right into that row below the yarn overs, because then you might have your end poking through the holes. So I went a row below that, and then I'm just going to trim the tail. There we go. So that's how my hat looks, and I really like that I-cord cast off. It's quite nice and stretchy. It kind of follows the kind of wavy pattern. Okay, so I hope this was helpful.